long as I have the water bottle and I'm drinking, I'm like, I don't need anything else. We're going to be in Luke chapter 12, by the way. I don't need anything else if I have my water bottle, right? Don't need a thing. And, we start thinking about it. I start thinking, I don't need anybody else for water because I have my water bottle. And I start thinking about things like the manna in the desert. Actually, I'm saying water bottle. I don't backwash. That's just tea. Sorry, I've seen backwash like that before, so I was really need to make that clear. But, you start thinking you don't need things. Manna in the desert. When God was giving Israel manna in the desert, it was on a day-to-day basis that they got it, except for on Shabbat, they had to collect it early so that they weren't collecting on Shabbat. If they didn't follow that and just like, well, we don't want to go hungry, so we're going to take extra on any of the other days, that turned rotten. And it didn't fall on Shabbat because they weren't supposed to be out collecting it. And what that's to teach us is that when we start thinking we have what we need, we don't necessarily rely on God so much because our needs are being taken care of. A lot of times it's like, well, look at what I've done. Leading up to a section of verses that we're going to be reading in Luke, he leads up with talking about Christ is going to return someday. Don't put your faith in possessions, is what it says earlier on. Like what we're talking about. Don't put your faith in that. Put it in something that's worth more. Even when it's hard and nobody else is looking, put your faith in God. He said that's what it is. It's talking about the house and making sure that you're waiting for the bridegroom to come home because you don't know when that's going to happen. So you need to be serving God all the time. Not just when it's easy. Be persevering with what you know to be true. We also get in this piece a dichotomy. We've heard Yeshua is the Prince of Peace. However, in this section, it also talks about he doesn't bring peace but division. This is what Christ is talking about. In one house, you will have kids turning against their parents, parents turning against their in-laws, and you will see this. And you're like, well, wait a second, what's with this whole peace on earth stuff? Well, what he says before he starts talking about this, and I want to keep you in mindset of what we're going to read, he says he's bringing fire to the earth. Why? Well, he's planning on purifying the earth. And he's bringing peace. You can't have the unholy with the holy. And so he's coming, and you'll see the division. And when we get to the scripture we read, it's interesting how it fits into this section. The division that he's talking about, when he says there's going to be a division between family, Micah 7:6 is what he's quoting on this, or he's referring to this. And he says, you will have division in the family. Kids won't like their parents, all this sort of thing. And he concludes in verse 7, but as for me, I will look to the Lord. I will wait for the God of my salvation. My God will hear me. So as a result of this, he's saying you need to be repentant. You need to come before God, and you need to make him first all the time. All right? Then we get into Luke, the part that we're going to be reading here. And he says this, starting in verse 54. He also said to the crowds, when you see a cloud rising in the west, you say at once, a shower is coming, because that would be coming from the sea. And so it happens. And when you see the south wind blowing, you say, now this is coming up from the desert, there will be scorching heat. And it happens. You hypocrites, you know how to interpret the appearance of earth and sky, but why do you not know how to interpret the present time? I know personally, it hasn't been 6 months that before 6 months ago, I just didn't watch the news. I mean, it says, interpret your current times, what's going on. Now, he's talking to the people saying, you're seeing the Son of God before you. You know, you need to be following me. That's the interpretation you should be getting right now. But we start looking at, in our times, what do we have to interpret? What do we see? I mean, I wouldn't watch the news. And my reason, and now I'm even wondering why I watch the news, because you got all this AI stuff out there. You've got to look at how many different news outlets, and all of them are so stinking opinionated one way or the other. You're like, well, what is the truth? You see a video and you're like, oh, that's the truth. Then you see it from different perspectives. Like, well, dang, what is the truth? And so, but we're supposed to be interpreting our times. Now, I find it interesting, and I think we get a better look at this, and you can turn there if you want, when Christ uses these same words about you need to pay attention to your times. And he mentions it in Matthew 16. Now, what I think is interesting is that he's not talking about the same topic. Like he's talking about there's these worldly things, you need to put it away and focus on heavenly things. And now keep in mind, I want to make sure the setting for this one is he just got done feeding 4,000 people miraculously. Then he's going to say, after he gives this advice about pay attention to the times, he's saying, don't worry about food so much. Worry about what the Pharisees and Sadducees are teaching you. Worry about spiritual food. That's more important. Don't worry about the physical stuff. Worry about the spiritual stuff. So this is set right in between there. And it says, and the Pharisees and the Sadducees came, and to test him, they asked him to show them a sign from heaven. He answered them, when it is evening, you say, it will be fair weather, for the sky is red. And in the morning, it will be stormy today, for the sky is red and threatening. You know how to interpret the appearance of the sky, but you cannot interpret the signs of the times. And an evil and adulterous generation seeks for a sign, but no sign will be given to it except the sign of Jonah. So he left them and departed. Now, I may be thinking here, it needs a sign because we're talking about looking at it in a worldly sense. Why do you need a sign? Because we're looking at it from a world point of view. That's what the Sadducees were doing. And he's saying you need to look at it from a godly perspective. That's the jump here. He's like, you're worried about food. You need to be worried about the spiritual blessing. And he says, I'll take care of you. I take care of the birds. I'll take care of you. And he's saying, you've got to look at it from spiritual, because it's spiritual warfare, what we're talking about, is what it looks at. Look at the times. Back to Luke. Now, it's interesting because these two connections are in different places in Matthew. And so if we get a better perspective, so he's drawing them to look at spiritual, not physical things. And it's in the middle of, you guys know, in Luke, this section is in the middle of, you're going to need to repent or you're going to perish. In Matthew, instead of worrying about food, about physical things, you can be worried about the heavenly things. And so he says this in Luke, starting in verse 57. And why do you not judge for yourselves what is right? As you go with your accuser before the magistrate, make an effort to settle with him on the way, lest he drag you to the judge, and the judge hand you over to the officer, and the officer put you in prison. I tell you, you will never get out until you have paid the very last penny. Okay, we're talking about what it seems like, pay attention to the signs, and all of a sudden we flip to make amends with your accuser, because he's going to throw you in prison. You're going to be in there for a long time. Now, these prisons were not nice places. They might forget to feed you. You know, it was like, we're not going to spend very much on you. The only people that actually might have had enough food is if you came from a wealthy background and people were providing you food. So why this jump? Well, that prison was a Roman perspective. When you talk about they're going to throw you in prison until your debt is paid, that's a Roman idea. That's a worldly idea. What does Torah tell us to do? In Leviticus chapter 25, they start talking about you need to be dealing with people honestly. You owe them money. You're going to borrow money from them for their fields or whatever. You pay them back. Your Jubilee's coming up. You don't give them a whole bunch of money for a field you're not going to have for very long. They're not going to expect that from you. In fact, when the year of Jubilee comes, you're going to get your field back. And then you can make another deal if you want to. That's how he's telling us to deal with it. You start dealing with it by, hey, we're going to take it before a magistrate. That's a worldly perspective, which is what the scriptures are trying to tell us to do. Look at the times. Don't interpret them as the worldly will, because then you're going to be judged by the worldly, and you're going to be punished in the worldly, as opposed to looking for the spiritual peace. Now, in Matthew chapter 5, it kind of expands on this. Now, what happens here is that Christ has just, like before this, he has just pointed everybody back to the Torah. He said, you need to follow my word. He's saying that don't ignore a jot or tittle, which is just little markings in Hebrew that you would see in the Torah. Don't ignore the lightest, smallest one. And then he says, if it even goes on, it says, and if you teach people to kind of relax those things, it's going to be less for you in the kingdom of heaven. So it's right after he says, go back to the Torah, and then he starts getting into specifics. So he says, all right, you need to follow the Torah. And then in verse 21, he says, you have heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not murder, and whoever murders will be liable to judgment. But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. Whoever insults his brother will be liable to the council, and whoever says, you fool, will be liable to the hell of fire. Now, what he's pointing out, he's not making up new things. He's trying to get back to the Torah is a spiritual thing. It is a matter of your heart when you're following God's laws. And he's saying murder in the Ten Commandments covers a lot more than just killing somebody. If we go to Leviticus chapter 19, this is where we get that. Leviticus 19, verses 17 to 18, says this, you shall not hate your brother in your heart, but you shall reason frankly with your neighbor, lest you incur sin because of him. You shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against the sons of your own people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. So what he's referring you back to is the Torah. Christ isn't making up something new. He's saying, go back to the Torah. Now, if we see that, and we see that, okay, he's just saying you're in danger, he goes on with verse 23. So if you are offering your gift at the altar, and then there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go. First, be reconciled to your brother, and then come and offer your gift. Come to terms quickly with your accuser while you are going with him to court, lest your accuser hand you over to the judge, and the judge to the guard, and you be put in prison. Truly I say to you, you will never get out of jail until you have paid the last penny. What we should be looking at is that what he's referring us back to is that if you look at stuff from a worldly perspective, you're going to let the world tell you what's right and wrong, and you will be punished by the world. You go back to the Torah, and what does he say? He says, get things taken care of with your brother, so you're not going to let the world judge you. He said, you are doing what you're supposed to do. It doesn't say, forget about the offering to God. It says, when you're coming before God, you're supposed to be doing that with a pure heart. You're supposed to be doing that because you love God, you want to serve God. He said, if you're trying to do that, but you've got something against your brother, well, we're talking about following Torah here. Go take care of that. So that when you come back and you are here with God, I mean, that's one reason why we do our prayer requests at the beginning, because if you have something on your heart, you want to put that before God, and then you can be in God's presence. And that's really what they're going at here, is that go back to the Torah, read what it says, and get things right with your brother, because we're not going to do it the world way, because the world's going to get to punish you. And if that's how you're going to see it, then you follow those rules with that. It's all about the spiritual warfare. It goes back to the heart. Which way are you going to look at the world? In a biblical way or in a worldly way? How are you going to go about your business with that? Now, as we come into the next week, I always try to challenge a little bit, and lately the last weeks have been, share your faith with somebody. And if you're like me, it's hard. You're praying, you're asking for that opportunity, and you're kind of waiting for it. But there's also something else you can do in that prayer as you witness to other people. We're supposed to be looking at the signs of our times, right? We're supposed to be following Torah. The world, now keep in mind, the world does not understand why you would take care of it. Why don't you just take them to court instead of trying to handle it before you go to court? The world's not going to see wisdom in what you're doing. The world's not going to like what you're doing. But what we do is we follow the Torah. We can pray that we can be that witness to other people. That's the light that they're going to see. That's the light that somebody at some point is going to say, I want some of that. And so as we go into this world, we want to keep praying, Lord, give me the opportunity to share that you died on the cross for sin and you came back. Let's keep praying for that, because that's the end game right there. That's where it all matters. But let's also be praying that we can get into our words. Pray for discernment, be reading our scriptures, see what the Torah is actually telling us, because it tells us what to do. It tells us how, when you're in a situation you don't understand what to do, there's instruction there for us. Let's pray.